Welcome to Stitching the Dream, the podcast for quilt lovers. I'm Tasha, a quilt-obsessed working mom building a business one stitch at a time. Around here, we're all about good vibes, real talk, and cheering each other on. So today, I want to talk about gifting quilts and some tips for gifting quilts. But before we even get to the practical tips, I think we need to have a bigger conversation. Should you be gifting a quilt? And I have some rough bulleted ideas, but really I'm going to talk this out live with you today, trying to figure out my opinions on gifting quilts. So one reason you may give the gift of a quilt is because you simply have made too many and you are running out of storage and you need to give the gift of the quilt, and you may give that to a person, you may donate to a charity, you may do a lot of different things with it. The second reason we might give a gift of a quilt is, a very specific individual with a very specific quilt in mind. And, could be a wedding gift, a birthday gift, a Christmas gift, and, it goes on and on. Gift of a new baby, a baby quilt. And so I think that's where we need to be a little bit more careful. So the reason why I say that is if you are just making quilts to make quilts and you love them and then you have too many of them and you want to give them away, you might not be as emotionally invested in that quilt. I know that if I have an extra quilt and I give it to charity because there's not, it was fun to make it, but it doesn't hold any sentimental value to me, so to speak. I never care what happens to that quilt after I donate it. I give it completely selflessly. It goes to the charity, and I just trust that it is going to be used in a way that is appropriate and beneficial. However, if I make a gift, whether it's a handmade gift of any kind, I haven't really gifted too many full-size quilts just because, because of this topic we're talking about, is when I give a handmade gift, I really kind of think of this sliding scale of how much emotional attachment do I have to this gift? Meaning, if I give it and they don't use it in a way that I deem appropriate, how upset will I be? And how much does the person that is receiving the gift understand all of the sentimental value of a handmade gift like a quilt, right? Do they understand it could take hundreds of hours, or do they simply equate it to something purchased off the shelf? So if I think there's any hankering of me, now I'm talking about me as a human, if I give a handmade gift to somebody, and if I'm going to be thinking about what they're using it with, or if I have any of these rules in my head, like they need to act a certain amount of grateful, they need to use this particular gift in the correct way, they should, display it in a specific way, or they need to hold on to it, or they shouldn't use it. If I have any kind of rule associated with the handmade gift, that's not really a gift. That's a responsibility that you're giving to somebody that they may not even understand, that you're delegating that responsibility of that quilt with them, and that your feelings might be hurt if those unsaid rules aren't followed. So really, I challenge you to, when you go to give a gift of a quilt, are you able to give that quilt to the other person knowing that it could end up on their couch and used and cuddled? It could end up in a cabinet that they don't touch ever and find it 10 years later and go, oh yeah, I remember I got this. Are you going to be okay if you pop into their house and they see that the dog is using it, or it is in the trunk of their car in case of a snow emergency? Are you going to be okay with whatever decision they make? Maybe it'll end up in a garage sale. Maybe it'll end up in their donate bin. Who knows? Maybe a little child will be using it and spilling things on it and it'll be washed repeatedly. You have to get real comfy with all of those scenarios. Because if you're giving a gift, you should be giving that away freely and understand that they're going to receive that gift in whatever way they receive it, and it's no longer yours to control or dictate. You should not have an emotional reaction to what happens to that quilt after you gift it. This is why I have not gifted many quilts, because in the early days, I did gift a lot of quilts and I was feeling a certain kind of way. I did give them to maybe people who didn't understand the value on occasion, and it did bother me. And that's not fair to them, and it's not fair to me. And you kind of have to be able to recognize that this is happening, because I can truly see that if I gave a handmade gift to somebody that I was close with and visited often, and I had these unspoken rules that went along with this gift, and they weren't following them, that could really irritate me and impact my relationship with somebody. And that is quite literally the opposite of what a gift should do, right? It should build rapport and joy and build, you build your relationship, not be this unspoken thing or maybe even spoken thing that is disrupting your relationship. So how have I personally reconciled with this? One, if I give handmade gifts, they are small in nature. They are a pillow that doesn't take forever to make, a tote bag, a zipper bag, a cozy, things that I can, as someone who likes to make things and as someone whose love language is gift giving, I can make these gifts, get the dopamine hit that I like from making a gift and gifting a gift. But there's a low bar there in terms of how bothered I'm going to be if I find out in 6 months that the pillow was eaten by the dog or the cozy got lost or they didn't end up really liking that little hot pot I made or hot pad and it kind of, made its way to the donate bin. There's a scale there and that scale is going to be different for everybody. So maybe you use a simple patchwork, quilt pattern for somebody that you're not quite sure would fully appreciate it. And that way, maybe that one doesn't bother you as much because you didn't put as much effort into the design. Or maybe you don't spend as much time on your quilting of a quilt that, that sliding scale there. Oh, I don't know if these people are really going to appreciate it. So I'm not going to spend, 100 hours on my long arm perfecting this with ruler work, right? I'm just going to use a simple pantograph or straight line and get the job done, right? These are things that only you can answer for yourself. How much effort, what gift, and are you going to be okay with however it's used? So say you deem someone quilt worthy. What are some of the things we can do ahead of time to maybe make us feel better about this gift that we're giving that is not a responsibility for that person? It's not something they need to take care of in a specific way, but something that we can feel good about that is received and appreciated. So, for example, let's talk about my mom. My mom, who may be watching this, I would like to make all of my parents quilts. However, I've made none of them quilts. I took my mom to the Road to VA quilt show with me, and we walked around, and my mom would note which quilts she liked. She ended up really liking quite a few Lone Star quilts. So that gives me a hint into something where if I were to make my mom a quilt, I think a Lone Star or Lone Star inspired quilt might be a great option. If I do decide to make my mom a Lone Star quilt, which I do plan to, I do plan on sending my mom the pattern, maybe not the pattern, but certainly the color palette I'm entertaining. Why? Because my mother appreciates and understands how much work goes into a quilt. She wants a quilt, and she's pretty low maintenance in terms of her requests for a quilt. She just wants a quilt that her daughter made her. Fair. But I would like my mom to really enjoy the quilt as well. So I am quite comfortable that the surprise won't be ruined by speaking with my mother up front about, do you like these colors? What about this pattern? What about this size? What about this? What about that? Right? Like, I would like to make a quilt that she would like, and I'm okay with her knowing what an idea of what it might look like beforehand. I also know that she's going to love and appreciate it. I also know that she's got dogs that are going to lay on it. And I'm going into this like, you know what, if I make this quilt for her and she loves it and we take a picture of it and the damn dog eats it the next day, like that's a risk we're taking, right? So I think that you should consider, if you're going to be making a very large quilt and you don't know the person well and you want them to appreciate it, I think it's nice to have a conversation with them up front. Not everything in this life has to be a complete surprise to be appreciated and enjoyed. So one, consider having that chat with them about what colors they like and what styles they like. Now, my dad, I think, was leaning towards a more traditional style. I don't know about my stepmom, but I do know that she likes a lot of colorful things. My sister's a little bit easier because she's my sister. So, I know that a rainbow something will work just fine for her. So have those conversations. All right, so now you've determined this person's quilt worthy. You've picked out a quilt that you've made for them. And here's kind of some things where I have made a little checklist for myself when I am gifting some of these bigger quilts, the things that I'm going to do. One, I need to get better on this about everything, but certainly on the gifts I'm giving, I am now very much focused on labeling. I think I'm even going to attempt to label the hot pads I might make for Christmas this year. Spoiler alert for my family if you're watching. Because I'm going to get, if I decide to make handmade gifts this year for Christmas, they will be small and low bar, so that if, like I said, if they get donated, tossed in the trash, or ruined, they were fun while they lasted, right? So I am certainly going to label quilts. I think I'm going to label with my name, who I'm giving them to, and if there's a pattern, what year I made it, and if there's a special occasion. Merry Christmas, Mom. Love, Tasha, 2025. I think the label will continue to tell the story, even if it does end up like if you make somebody a quilt, you label it, it ends up in a thrift store. I think that it will help continue its story. I don't know about you, but when I'm thrifting or garage sailing and I see somebody's name and a date, it feels a little bit more special to me. I feel a little bit more connected to that quilt. And it does make me want to take it home and, do something with it and appreciate it and love it and think of the person who made it as I'm doing it. The other thing that I plan to do and have done in the past when I'm gifting quilts is I like to wash them first. I know this might not be everybody's cup of tea, but one, I like the recipient to receive the quilts in the condition that they can expect it when it comes out of the washer and dryer if they're washing and drying it. Because from a non-quilter's perspective, getting a nice, pristine, crisp-looking quilt, and then you wash and dry it and it's crinkled, I could imagine being like, what did I do wrong? So I like the idea of giving them a nice, crunchy, scrunchy, quilt. Selfishly, I also like to see that crinkle, so I like to see what it looks like before I gift it as well with the crinkle. I also am a color catcher user when I wash my quilts for the first time. So being able to throw those color catchers in and make sure that it's not bleeding the first wash is important to me. You could also consider giving them a couple color catchers for their first wash, or just talk to them about the concept of color catchers so they can choose to use that if they want. But with that, you also need, or I would highly recommend, giving care instructions. There are plenty of unique ways to do this. Even on Etsy, I found some pre-printed labels that you can use as gift tags. I'll link those in the show notes, where somebody has wonderfully made, these pre-printed tags so you can tell people how to wash and dry them. I wash and dry my quilts pretty much like I wash and dry everything else. And so I don't really tell anybody to go too crazy, but I do when I give my gift of a quilt, I say, please use it. Please wash it and dry it as you normally would. Please love on it. And if something happens to it, that is okay. But also I will fix it for you. So I think giving the gift of an offer of a repair is a great way. So, hey, use it, love it. And if something happens to it, give it back to me and we'll come up with a creative way to fix it. Because I don't know about you, but I spend all this time making quilts. I want to see them loved and used. And if there's a little bit of damage to it, that makes me happy that, it's been living a good life. The other thing I am going to consider doing and love the idea of in the future, I had just this written down in a random notebook. I don't know if I saw it somewhere, or I'm sure it's not an original idea, is I am going to consider making a coordinating pillowcase to use as the gift bag for the quilt. So if they choose to use it on their bed, they would have a quilted sham. I'm not sure what you call them. You know what I mean, but like a little decorative pillowcase that matches their quilt. I was thinking about this when I was thinking about my mom's Lone Star quilt pattern. What kind of quilt pillowcase I could also make that coordinates with it. I thought that would be a fun idea, but most of us know that when we're gifting quilts, usually we're up against a deadline and that might not be possible. But I do think that would be fun to consider for the packaging. Other people have a lot of great ways they package quilts. They fold them up nice and they use some leftover fabric to tie. I am not an aesthetic girly, but I'm sure that if you go and search out some YouTube videos, you can find lots of great creative packaging ideas. But I like the idea of a pillowcase that is both practical and something that I don't have to worry about making look fancy. So I guess to sum this up, 1, make sure that if you're giving a gift, you're not giving it as a responsibility. That is not good for you, that is not good for them, and it is not good for your relationship. Give a gift, not a chore. Once you've decided to give a gift, Think about the person's taste. Think about talking to them, thinking about if it'll go with their aesthetic. And if you don't know, talk to somebody around them or talk to them directly. Not everything needs to be a surprise. Think about pre-washing the quilt so there's no surprises when the person receives it. Like I said, I like to do the color catchers, make sure they know how to take care of it. Important that they understand the care instructions. Consider giving a warranty of letting them bring it back to you if it's in need of repair. And of course, label that darn quilt. And when you're presenting it as a gift, you can put it in a gift bag or consider something like tying it up nice and fancy, folding it nice and fancy, or creating a bag, a gift bag, or a pillowcase to actually gift it in. So, are you guilty of gifting responsibilities instead of gifts? I know I have been, and it has been very enlightening over the last several years, understanding that, thinking about that, and pivoting in how I'm gift giving. And I do this in more than just quilts too. Like sometimes I give gifts to people that they just truly cannot appreciate, and then I feel a certain kind of way, and I don't do that anymore because it's not healthy for anybody. So think about those gifts you're giving. Think about the responsibility that your implied responsibility that's going along with that gift, and, make your own decisions accordingly. Is there anything else you think I missed in terms of gifting a quilt and considerations for it? Do you ever give a matching accessory with your quilts? How do you wrap them and present them? Do you make them a surprise for the person, or do you talk to them up front? I would love to hear it all, as you know, because I'm sure I forgot some key points. In this week's Quilty shout out, I would like to shout out Sean from The Guy Who Sews. Sean has a YouTube channel where he goes live every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, and he also does a weekly podcast on Sundays. Sean is very generous with his time and very welcoming to new people to the YouTube community. He was one of the first people that reached out to me once I made my YouTube channel, and he even invited me to go live on his channel, which gave me the confidence to start going live myself on YouTube. I had only previously gone live on other platforms. I think anyone in the quilty community, whether you're a YouTube content creator or just a YouTube consumer, have experienced Sean, you know that he is very generous with his time and advice. So if you have not come across The Guy Who Sews, Sean, I will link his channel in the show notes below. And if you go and say hello, tell him I sent you. That's it for today's episode of Stitching the Dream. If you're looking for a good vibes quilting community, come hang out with me inside the Quilters Clubhouse. We cheer each other on, have monthly challenges, Zoom hangouts, and right now you can join for $8 a month and you'll get a copy of my Petals Crossing quilt pattern when you join. You'll find the link in the show notes or go to clubhouse.tashaquilts.com, and don't forget to come back every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern for a new episode of Stitching the Dream. Talk to you soon.